What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel. My coverage of the UFL continues. We're back for another week of UFL coverage. And again, much like we do every week, I'll be giving you my week 2 power rankings as well as my week 2 predictions. So we're going to talk about the 8 teams' performances in their first games as well as predicting what is going to happen here in week 2. I went 2-2 last week. There were a couple of upsets that happened this past week, at least in terms of what maybe was expected by most people to have happened. So, hey, if you guys are a fan of the UFL and you're new to the channel, you somehow found this video, hit the subscribe button. I also post a lot of college football content that I'm going to be rolling out as I do my coverage of the UFL this season as well. So be sure you hit the subscribe button, like, comment, share. You guys know ways to help support the channel, and I appreciate every single one of you guys. And hey, watching this video is a big part of supporting the channel. You guys do a lot of that. You guys do that already. So that's what you guys are here to do. Watch the video. We'll dive on into my week 2 power rankings, and staying at number 1 for the second week in a row. Really pretty easy to see why the Birmingham Stallions are still the number 1 team the UFL has to offer. Last week, a 27-14 win over the XFL champs from last year, the Arlington Renegades. And I mean, what didn't this team show you? They have statistically the top offense in terms of points per game, yards per game. They're the best third down conversion team in the league right now. If you do want to get nitpicky with this team, I mean, even the defense looked really, really good. But again, if you want to get nitpicky, it's a secondary that probably could use some work. Now, granted, they did go up against a really good quarterback in Luis Perez on the other side of the ball. But Matt Corral played really well in his first ever professional start, 201 yards, right around 57% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, did throw a pick as well. But again, everyone trying to settle in here to this new season. The running back duo of CJ Maribel and Ricky Person worked to perfection, even a couple receptions on the side of Ricky Person as well. This wide receiver core looked really good. Deon Kane, Benjamin Victor, Marlon Williams, Jay Sternberger, all of them looked really good, apart from maybe a couple plays where you could get a little nitpicky there. But for the most part, that's a wide receiver core that looked really good. And when you look at some of the defensive leaders, I mean, Carlos Davis was everywhere for this team. 6 tackles, 3 of them by himself, did have a sack and a forced fumble as well. Kayava Tizino and Scooby Wright, that linebacking duo was fantastic. Even though Scooby Wright only had 2 tackles, did get one of those as a tackle for loss. In the cornerback room, Chris Jackson, Mark Gilbert, Lorenzo Burns, and a ton of other guys that I could have put here on this list performed really, really well, including the likes of Mark Gilbert, who came away with an interception picking off Luis Perez. So this is a Stallions team that, I mean, really easy to see why they are still the number 1 team. Coming up this week, you got to go on the road to play the Michigan Panthers. Ooh, that definitely can be a very interesting game, and I'll talk more about why when I preview it, but I don't need to spend long defending why the Birmingham Stallions are still the number 1 team in my power rankings, and should be in yours too if you are someone that's sort of power ranking the UFL. Look, still the top offense, and while the defensive statistics don't necessarily stack up to that of the league yet, wait till the end of the season. This could definitely be a top 3 offensive and defensive team throughout the league. Again, you just had to go up against one of the better quarterbacks in the league in Luis Perez. So this is going to be a very fun team to watch here down the stretch. They do not, or I should say they have their first in-division game coming up here against the Michigan Panthers, a team that they are used to seeing out of the USFL. Again, in Ford Field, that's going to be a very interesting game, but I don't need to sit here and defend anymore why the Stallions are still number 1. They did a lot of things really well. Again, if you want to get nitpicky, I do think the secondary does need some work, even though Mark Gilbert came away with a pick. But again, that just happens to be the fact that they played Luis Perez and kind of got shredded at points by this wide receiver core from the Renegades. Moving on here to number 2, a lot of changes below the Birmingham Stallions. The Stallions, I believe, were the only constant. I think they are the only team that stayed the same, although I could be mixing something up here. But the Memphis Showboats are all the way up here at number 2. They had an 18-12 win over Houston, and this was just a very impressive performance to watch. They held the ball for almost 40 minutes in that game against Houston. And yes, while the Houston offense was stagnant, and yes, while they were without their top rusher in Mark Thompson, this is still the top rush and pass defense in the league as of right now. I still want more production offensively from guys like Darius Victor, though, and I still would like to see a little more defensive production as again, they only really got 21 minutes to prove themselves, and that's just due to Memphis holding onto the ball for so long. Case Cookus was phenomenal, 30, or I should say 23 of 40 for 204 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. But again, that run game didn't necessarily get going. I believe Case Cookus was the leading rusher there in that game. So when I say more production, it starts out with this running back room. Darius Victor had 10 carries, only 3 yards. That has got to get better. He has got to be able to start to find his rhythm, especially when you have a pretty tough 3-game stretch here between, San Antonio, at Birmingham, and then at St. Louis there as well. This is going to be a really, really tough 3-game stretch here for Memphis. I mean, you do get your first home game, but those back-to-back road games against two of the better offenses in the league is going to be really hard here. You're going to need to be able to keep pace, and while Case Cookus is a really good quarterback, Darius Victor is going to need to pick up the pace, and maybe some other running backs there as well. Wide receiver core, tight end room, pretty darn good. Again, Case Cookus has a lot of really good weapons to throw to. You can look at all of the names there. John Atkins, again, as I talked about in my first video, as kind of being one of the more staples on the defensive line in this league, had 2 tackles, wasn't necessarily a huge force, but again, no one on this defense really had to be. TJ Neal had a pretty good day. Greg Reeves, you take a look at that, had a phenomenal day. 3 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 2 sacks, 1 forced fumble. Kyrie Woods had a forced fumble, and Christian McFarland was able to recover one of those fumbles. Max Roberts had a sack there as well. So this is a defense that can get into the backfield. And again, what did I talk about? This is the defensive back 7 that's going to need to force turnovers. You take a look right there, a forced fumble from Greg Reeves and a forced fumble from Kyrie Woods. By the way, those are 2 players that play in the back 7. Very impressed with Memphis. Obviously can't jump them over Birmingham, but the Showboats have moved into the number 2 spot in my UFL power rankings. We'll move on to the number 3 spot here. How about the San Antonio Brahmas? What a performance that was against the DC Defenders, a 27-12 win in the opening game. You got to go on the road to play Memphis, a team that I just talked about. It's going to be a tough matchup for them, but let's look at what went well for the San Antonio Brahmas. Chase Garbers was excellent. Only threw 25 passes, only had 156 yards, but completed 19 of those, 2 of them for touchdowns. Anthony McFarland just proved that he has really, really good playmaking abilities. 9 carries, 47 yards. Did have a receiving touchdown on his lone catch on the day as well. John Trey Kirkland was everywhere for this team. Chase Garbers found him 8 out of the 19 completed passes for 61 yards and a touchdown. Marquez Stevenson played well, and they even successfully ran a fake field goal try. It was Alex Malati, however you say the last name again. I apologize profusely for mispronunciations, but that is that was a play where Malati wasn't even really supposed to be open. In fact, the punter, whose name is escaping my mind, said that was only supposed to be like a 1 route play. So the Malati getting open and getting to the end zone, I mean, I don't necessarily want to call it luck, but you could kind of chalk it up to it being pretty much that. I forgot to mention what I put there at the top of the board, but this is the top 3 total offensive and rushing offensive team, and the red zone defense was impeccable. They did not allow DC to score a touchdown. It was all field goals for the defenders in that past game, led by guys like Tim Ward. He was able to get a sack. Right, Wyatt Ray was able to get back there, have a sack. A lot of guys with pass breakups, tees to board, Darius Phillips, AJ Hendy, all those guys in the defensive backfield. 2 guys with 9 tackles. That's Jordan Williams, a middle linebacker, and Jordan Mosley, a safety. So 2 Jordans getting in on the 9 tackle party. However, there still are some things to really look at with this Brahmas team, especially on 3rd down. Now, this is in part because DC does have a lot of good defenders, especially on that defensive front, but they only went 1 for 8 on 3rd down in that game. Every other down, they were really pretty darn good. However, 3rd down was something they really, really struggled on. And if you start struggling on 3rd down without really getting into scoring territory, much like San Antonio was able to do here in this game, that's definitely going to cost you, especially if you end up playing a team where your red zone defense maybe is not as strong as it was today. However, I expect all those things to continue. Again, improve that 3rd down margin. Try to get some guys a little bit more involved, maybe defensively. But I loved everything I saw from the Brahmas in that win over DC. Again, obviously more questions about the defenders than I do the Brahmas. They are up here to number 3. I have seen a lot of power rankings where you would look and see the team here at number 4, and you'd say, oh, it should be the Michigan Panthers. They won last week, right? To me, that's not how power rankings should work. It's not going to be all the teams that won at the top and all the teams that lost at the bottom. I have the Arlington Renegades here at 4. So I actually remember I had them at 4 last week. So I lied earlier when I said that there was a movement to or for everyone besides the Stallions. No, the Renegades didn't move either. I kept them here at the number 4 spot. And look, let's just be honest. You played the best team in the league and honestly fared fairly well, even though that your defense was not able to hold up. In fact, they're last or second to last. I'll just go ahead and say bottom 3 in a lot of defensive categories. That's just that's going to happen when you play an offense as good as Birmingham, especially with how many playmakers they have. But they're top 3 in passing offense and in third down conversion. They're the top team in total tackles, so tackling not going to be an issue for this team down the road, as the defense, again, probably going to end up remaining a staple for this team for many points throughout this year. Luis Perez still continues to prove why he is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Went 19 of 28, 214 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Again, that's going to happen when you play a team as good as Birmingham. The running back duo was pretty solid. Letty Brown and Davian Smith did have some good moments. Again, the wide receiver core was pretty good. Tyler Vaughn's maybe expected a little bit more from him, but his production is going to ramp up as the season goes along. And when you take a look at this defense here, now look, I said that this team is last defensively, and again, it just so happens that when you play the best offense in the league, that yeah, your defense is probably going to not look as statistically good as it probably is. I mean, Vic Beasley, phenomenal player. Jalen Redmond had 6 tackles as a defensive tackle. He played really, really well. Markel Lee was really good in this game. He totaled 9 tackles, and a lot of the defensive backfield was pretty good. Deron Lowe and Darren Evans both had a pass breakup and a pick in that game. One of those picks, I believe, was thrown by Matt Corral. The other was thrown by Adrian Martinez, if I am not mistaken. Going back to the Stallions, Martinez went down with injury. We hope he is okay. But this is a secondary that played really fairly well for the amount of talent it went up against. Now, obviously, it got worn down and it got shredded late. But this is still a Renegades team that I'm really confident in. A huge matchup coming up with the St. Louis Battlehawks in this next game. St. Louis has got a lot of questions to answer. Talk about that when we get there. But again, Renegades, just a product of playing the best team in the league. They come up with a loss here in week 1. Starting out 0-2 would definitely not be the best thing here as they go enter St. Louis. We'll talk more about that game when we get to my predictions. We're halfway done as we enter the bottom half now. Look, even though the Michigan Panthers technically are in the bottom half of my power rankings, this is a new look team. They look immensely different from the team in the USFL that over 2 years went 6-21. I had them last in my power rankings because I just needed to see them prove it. Prove that they had changed, prove that they have improved, and boy, did they ever. Now, while it wasn't pretty, while there was a lot of offensive line protection issues, while they did lose the turnover battle, and while statistically this is still a bottom half defense in the league, this is still a very, very positive outlook for the Michigan Panthers. E.J. Perry was not fantastic, but he still was pretty good. 12 of 24, 176 yards, did rush in for 2 touchdowns there late. Wes Hills was fantastic. We know what Wes Hills can do, the leading rusher in the USFL last year, continuing to come in and put on a clinic. He is the leading rusher in the UFL as it currently stands right now. Just due to the sheer lack of completions, the wide receiver / tight end room was not super prominent. I mean, Devin Ross and Marcus Sims, Trey Quinn, a lot of guys that have potential. Cole Hikutini was hit on a 41-yard dime from Perry. So, hey, you have that to look forward to, especially if Hikutini can kick up in production from the tight end spot. And it was a defense that overall did play fairly decently. Now, it got shredded towards the end, but for, I'll say, three, maybe even 3.5 quarters, this is a defense that looked very, very good. Daniel Wise was very good on the defensive front. Frank Ginda was very good up front as well as an outside linebacker / edge rusher, totaling 5 tackles. Kai Nakua, Bryce Terrendon, Keith Gibson, Nate Brooks, all of those guys fared very well. In fact, Nakua even came up with a sack from his free safety position, 11 tackles for him against what a lot of people thought was going to be one of the better offenses in the entire league. So good on the Michigan Panthers for really slowing that down. Again, they ended up getting shredded late, but it was Jake Bates that came away as the hero here, 3 yards shy of the NFL record for a guy who has not kicked since high school. He nailed a 64-yarder, and I mean nailed a 64-yarder. It was pure down the line on the money. Jake Bates is the hero for the Michigan Panthers. They may need another hero when they have to play the Birmingham Stallions this week. Going to be a tough matchup. We'll preview it here in a little bit. Moving on into the other three teams that lost this past weekend, the DC Defenders were one of them. And a lot of surprise now, not necessarily the biggest surprise of the week. The Panthers beating the Battlehawks probably was the biggest surprise, but San Antonio winning that game, if you were going to pick an upset, you were probably going to pick that one. Probably didn't predict it by as much as it did. Now, for as good as the Brahmas' red zone defense was, this is a DC offense that has to improve in the red zone. Jordan Ta'amu showed what a good quarterback he is. 25 of 45, 227 yards, did throw, no touchdowns and one pick, as DC was actually kept out of the end zone this week by the San Antonio Brahmas. Again, Jordan Ta'amu has great quarterback play, and I believe 4 or 5 different receivers had at least 4 catches from this game. Ty Scott, Brandon Smith, Kiki Cutie, and one more that I did not put on here. Kelvin Harmon was really good for this team, and then Alex Ellis out of that tight end spot was good for this squad as well. Maybe you're going to need someone besides Cameron Harris to step up in the running back game and give Jordan Ta'amu a little bit of help. Probably need this offensive line to step up, play a little bit better as well. The safety duo of Santos Ramirez and DJ Swearinger did play pretty well. Isaiah Johnson, Michael Joseph, hey, they played pretty well themselves. In fact, Michael Joseph, 7 tackles, all of them by himself. Way to go, Michael Joseph. Malik Fisher on the defensive end was an absolute stud. Anthony Hines in the linebacker room. Definitely going to need some other linebackers to step up. Going to need some other defensive linemen to step up here as well. Overall, I definitely do think it's a lot of little things that need to be fixed for DC, but it's a lot of things that can be fixed relatively easily. I have confidence with DC moving forward. You got Houston this week, very winnable game, but the third down dilemma is tricky. They were not a great third down offense, but they were a phenomenal third down defense. So we'll see what improves moving forward. DC's got some things to figure out, but they can rocket right back to the top here of the power rankings with some wins coming in their next couple of games. DC dropping down here to 6. St. Louis dropped down here to 7. Very close for me between St. Louis and DC. Whoever you happen to put at 6 or 7 doesn't really matter to me. In my opinion, I think DC's ceiling is just a lot higher than St. Louis's, so that's why St. Louis is down here at 7. They had a very middling offense, even for as well as A.J. McCarron played. 24 of 37, 216 yards, 2 touchdowns. And while on paper, the Michigan Panthers defense is not super star-studded, it played very well. This is an offense that probably should have done a lot more than it did against the Michigan Panthers. Now, yes, it did shred them late, and it was able to find the end zone, but it was too little too late, and their defense gave up too much late, especially along that defensive line. Not enough pressure created to E.J. Perry, who, again, had a very, very good game, but this defensive back room, hey, they did play pretty well. Cam Kelly, Quinterio Cole, and others definitely did have a pretty solid game. Mike Rose and Willie Harvey, that linebacker duo, did play pretty solidly as well. Pretty good production from the defensive line here as well, especially by a guy by the name of Travis Feeney. But besides Feeney getting pressure, there was not a whole lot of pressure gotten to the backfield. Willie Harvey, yes, did have a couple tackles for loss there as well, but I want to see them pressure specifically the quarterback more and not necessarily just get into the backfield to slow down a guy as good as Wes Hills. Again, A.J. McCarron has got a lot of weapons. Marcel Aitman, Darius Shepard, the tight end Jake Sutherland caught a touchdown in this game. Wayne Gallman, Jacob Sailors were other really good pieces here to this team, but St. Louis has got to fix protection issues on the offensive line. The offense has probably got to get going a whole lot sooner, and this is the defense that I just want to see a little uptick in production, especially keeping these offenses out of the end zone. You have Arlington this week, and probably is what might be the biggest game of the week. Maybe not in terms of power rankings, but just in terms of, hey, if you fall to 0-2, you could be in a lot of trouble. And then the final team down here by process of elimination, has to be the Houston Roughnecks. They lost to Memphis last week, and this is the team that I have the most questions with coming out of last week. The offense was stagnant and sits last or second to last in a lot of categories. Even with Mark Thompson out, the running back room did not step up like it should have. Your quarterback, Jared Guarantano, was your leading rusher in that game. Now, albeit did play pretty well throwing the ball. 16 of 21 for 158 yards. He found guys like Kirk Merritt, Justin Hall, Braden Bowman. And again, this offense did not get a lot of time to prove itself. They were only on the field for around 21 minutes or so, or I should say less than that, right around 20 minutes, because Memphis held onto the ball for quite some time. However, this is the Houston Roughneck team that also needs to work on discipline. It was the most penalized team in week 1 out of anyone in the UFL, and a very tough matchup coming up with DC this week. Now, defensively, there still was a lot of really good production. I like how Toby Johnson played. I like how Adam Rodriguez played. I love how Reuben Foster played. He's going to be one of the leaders of this defense, and this is still a very good defensive front, and they proved it by limiting what the Memphis tailbacks were able to do. Defensive back-wise, I thought they played pretty solid as well. But when you get deeper into the season, I mean, I don't think any game is really going to be easy for Houston to win here if that offense stays as stagnant as it was. Now, again, when Mark Thompson comes back, there are going to be a lot of things that change in this offense because maybe besides Wes Hills, he's probably the best running back in this league. So as soon as he comes back, there are going to be some things that start to turn around for this Roughneck group. However, until then, the offense has got to find some rhythm. The running backs have to step up, and you have to be more disciplined, not only in coverage, in protection, in pass rush, but in just pure penalties, in football knowledge, no holding, no pass interference, nothing like that, as they were the most penalized team in week 1. That does it for my power rankings. We'll dive on into my predictions. We'll start out with what probably is the biggest game in terms from a power ranking side because it pits the teams that I have at 2 and 3. It's the San Antonio Brahmas versus the Memphis Showboats. This one's going to be on Saturday, April 6th. It's going to be on ESPN. You can watch it at noon Eastern Standard Time. It'll take place in Memphis, Tennessee. We'll go through the keys here for each team. For the San Antonio Brahmas, the offensive line. I talked about it in my last video. It definitely needs to gel and needs to find more of a solid rhythm. It has to be able to create pushback against John Atkins and this Memphis Showboat defensive line that was really pretty good. Now, I know they didn't go up against Mark Thompson, but there are still some really solid backs that play for the Houston Roughnecks, and Memphis was able to limit them really well. This is an offensive line that not only is going to have to create some protection and be able to help their quarterback and Chase Garbers out, but you also have to be able to create holes for the running backs and provide protection for Garbers to be able to hit these wide receivers down the field. Defensively for San Antonio, you got to be able to pressure Cookus and move the pocket. Chase Cookus is a very accurate, very good passer, and he proved it last week against the Houston Roughnecks. I would not be surprised to see this. I would not be surprised to see Chase Cookus go off and have a pretty good day here if San Antonio cannot limit him. That has to be the number one biggest priority here. Pressure Chase Cookus if you can limit what the Memphis running back room is able to do, much like what Houston was able to do last week, and you are able to pressure Cookus, you're able to get him to the ground. San Antonio is going to have a pretty good day here, but I would be remiss if I did not mention the time of possession battle when talking about this game. I've talked about it already. Memphis held the ball for 39 minutes. 39 and a half minutes in their past game. San Antonio's got to keep the ball out of Memphis's hand if they want to have a shot here to win this game. First home game for the Memphis Showboats. What will they need to do? Well, again, as I just talked about, Chase Cookus is going to be solid unless he gets pressured, right? If he gets pressured, could be a pretty long day for Showboat fans. However, this is a team that needs running back help and needs offensive line help as well. You need offensive line help to be able to open up things for the running backs, but Chase Cookus is not going to be able to do it all himself. The Brahmas showed too much life for me to have confidence that, I guess for me to have any doubts that the Brahmas are going to look like, that the Brahmas are going to look like what the Houston Roughnecks looked like last week and just slow, stagnant offensively. The Brahmas are not going to do that in this game. So Cookus, yes, still needs to be solid, but the running back room needs to step up and give Chase Cookus help. It starts with the offensive line giving him protection and being able to open up those holes for the running back room. I think, again, the defensive line has the advantage up front against this Brahmas offensive line, which, again, definitely did show a lot of good things, but still didn't gel super well in that pass game, as DC was able to live in the backfield for a lot of that game. So Memphis has got to be able to or I should say, oh no, yes, Memphis has got to be able to step up. That defensive line has got to get pressure, get Chase Garbers on the ground, and I think the back seven is going to step up again. The Brahmas are the favorite in this game, but I do like Memphis to pull out with the win. I got Memphis winning this one 20-18. I think it's going to be a low scoring defensive battle. Both of these defensive lines are going to be able to create pressure, and I do think that both these back sevens will be effective. I do like Memphis a little bit more on paper. I like Chase Cookus a little more than Chase Garbers. I like the wide receiver core a little bit better than what San Antonio has, and I especially like the matchup of the defense versus the offensive line with Memphis a little bit more. So I will pick the Showboats to win this game, and they will win it by 2 points. Move on to the other game being played on Saturday, an 8 o'clock game on ABC, taking place in St. Louis, Missouri. One of the biggest home field advantages that we have seen in spring football. The Arlington Renegades are going to go up against the St. Louis Battlehawks. And this is a game to avoid falling to 0-2. Both of these teams are 0-1 right now. Both of these teams play in the same division. The winner of this game is going to get a huge leg up, not only on the other, but on their division, being able to grasp a hold of that playoff spot. What can we expect from the Renegades? We'll expect an uptick in production from the offense. Now, look, this offense still played really darn well, but I would expect an uptick in production from a couple people. Louis Perez is still going to do his thing. This is a running back duo that's still going to do their thing, but I think Tyler Vaughns is going to have a lot better of a day here. It's a wide receiver core that could prove to have a lot better of a day, and I think an offensive line that's going to step up and play a lot better, especially while yes, St. Louis is able to provide pressure at times, they really did have a hard time slowing down this run game. I think an uptick in running back production you will see in this game from the Renegades, and I think the defense will look better on paper. Again, you're going to go up against another very tough offense. We'll talk about what A.J. McCarron and company can do later. Again, a lot of it depends on if they can get Ja'Cour Pearson back and play in this game, but the defense is still going to be a staple for Arlington. A lot of good players in that defensive front. The secondary, despite getting burned on a couple of plays, really did play well for the most part against the Birmingham Stallions. It's going to look a lot better on paper after this week is all said and done, but handling the crowd is going to be a tough ask. Again, this is probably the best home field advantage that the UFL will see this year, and it's with the St. Louis Battlehawks, and it's with a really dynamic offense in A.J. McCarron. He's going to make plays, but he needs protection. St. Louis did have a lot of offensive line trouble last week. Cannot happen this week at all. A.J. McCarron is going to need time to throw. If he was given a little bit more time to throw on a couple different plays in that game against the Michigan Panthers, that game probably swings differently. So the offensive line, look for them to make an adjustment and look for them to step up and play a lot better here, and especially, again, attack the secondary for this Renegades team. The defensive front going to be really, really good, and it's a staple with this Arlington team. It's what helped him win an XFL title last year. However, when you are looking at the secondary, while it still has a lot of strong pieces, it's what cost them the game against the Birmingham Stallions, and the Battlehawks are more than capable of being able to take advantage of that. Again, I already talked about it a little bit, but the defensive line has got to create some pressure here for St. Louis. Didn't do it enough in that game against Michigan. They have to do it here. You have to contain Louis Perez, keep the pocket close, maybe even move the pocket a little bit, make Louis Perez have to throw on the run, but we all know he can do that too. You got to create pressure. You got to contain Perez. You got to shrink that pocket, make him throw in some tight windows. And I think St. Louis is going to do that. Not only do I also think the Battlehawks have the better offense here, I also think the defense is going to step up and the home crowd is going to walk away happy. Again, the best home field advantage the UFL will see this year, I think, takes place in St. Louis. Battlehawks will walk away with a 24-21 win as the Renegades fall to 0-2. Moving on here, and not going to spend too much time on this game, as I feel like it's a fairly easy game to predict, but the Michigan Panthers surprised us all last week. Can they surprise again this week against the number one team in the league, the Birmingham Stallions? This one's on Sunday, April 7th. It'll take place at noon Eastern Standard Time at Ford Field you can watch it on ESPN. Let's talk about what the Stallions need to do again. They just looked dominant throughout their entire performance last week against the Arlington Renegades. They're going to need to be dominant again, and I think will be again on offense. There were a couple points where, again, the St. Louis offensive line just didn't look great, and Michigan was able to get into the backfield. Birmingham does not have that problem. In fact, they have kind of the opposite problem, or I guess it's not a problem at all, but the offensive line didn't allow much from the Renegades to get through at all. Now, the Renegades were still able to get through. They have a lot of good players on that defensive front, as do the Michigan Panthers. However, I still think this is an offense that's going to look very, very dynamic. But defensively, again, if you want to get nitpicky, it's a defensive back room that has to improve. Now, how well can EJ Perry and company take advantage of that? We'll see. They couldn't really do it super well against the St. Louis Battlehawks, but stopping Wes Hills is the number one priority here for the Birmingham Stallions. That defensive line has got to be able to close those gaps. They've got to keep Wes Hills in the backfield, prevent him from ripping off some of those longer runs, even if they're chunk yardage runs, even if he's just getting 7, 8, 9 yards every single carry, that is still a problem. Because at that point, the Panthers are going to figure it out and give it to Wes Hills on every play. The defensive line has to stay strong. For the Michigan Panthers, Wes Hills is going to move. Yes, the Stallions are capable of slowing him down, but Wes Hills is too good of a player to be able to be stopped for an entire game. EJ Perry needs to attack this secondary. It might be the one weak point on this Birmingham Stallions team. You have to attack it. You have to be able to beat these defensive backs as they got beat a lot of times, especially in that first half against the Arlington Renegades. You have to limit what Matt Corral and the explosive wide receivers can do. So much like you need to challenge the defensive backs of the Birmingham Stallions, the defensive backs of the Michigan Panthers will be challenged because this is the most explosive wide receiver room in the league. So this is going to need to be a Michigan Panther team that, hey, steps up, plays well. You've got to limit what Matt Corral can do, create pressure to him. These corners and safeties need to be able to lock down these wide receivers, and especially because Michigan plays with that free safety, no big plays, no one behind you mentality is what you have to play with here. Can the new look Panthers tame the Birmingham Stallions? I don't think so. I think Birmingham's just too explosive. They're too lethal. Michigan is right now riding on a very, very good story, but Birmingham is simply just way too good. I think they cover the spread. 28-17 is where I have this one finishing out. Birmingham will once again prove their might. Maybe the Panthers can surprise us all for a second straight week. I just don't see it. Too many questions for me for the Panthers and too much proven from the Stallions in past spring seasons and in that game in week 1. Final competition here, again by process of elimination, is between the Houston Roughnecks and the DC Defenders. This one also takes place on Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Washington, D.C. You can find this one on Fox. Another really good home field advantage here for D.C. They do have a lot of really good fans that show up to these games. They're favored by 5 in this one, going up against a Roughnecks team that, well, again, has their fair share of questions from last week. Guarantano and company needs this offense to come to life. Who knows if Mark Thompson is going to be playing here in this game? This is an offense that has to find some life and has to find some consistency. They were able to come to life in that second half against Memphis, but the Memphis defense was too good, and for the Houston offense, it was just too little too late. Guarantano needs this offense to come to life, and they have to be able to find their rhythm early and often, because if you're going to try to play from behind against this DC team, you're going to have your hands full. The defensive line is going to be able to bully their way through, though, and maybe not only their defensive line, but guys like Reuben Foster and others. This is the defense that is going to play really, really well, especially on the defensive front 7, because this is going to be another tough matchup for this secondary, because Jordan Ta'amu, again, when you take a look at what he did in that past game, he was really spraying the field. Again, I believe 4 or 5 different guys had at least 4 catches. He's going to need to continue to do that in this game. Continue to challenge these defensive backs, get the linebackers off their mark, get the defense scrambling. As long as this offensive line can hold up, and as long as this offensive line is going to be able to limit the pressure that guys like Foster and others are going to bring from this Roughneck team, it is definitely going to be a very, very prolific day for Jordan Ta'amu back there at quarterback. But hey, much like what the Roughnecks want to do and see this offense come to life, DC does not want to see that at all. You got to keep this offense slow and control the tempo of the game. Make Houston play slow. Houston's going to want to try to play fast to at least get some momentum going. DC has got to be able to play slow, slow down the game, take your time, win the time of possession battle, because much like what we saw happen with the Memphis Showboats game, when Houston loses the time of possession battle, again, it's an offense that can't find consistent rhythm often enough to be able to make up for that lost time. But the battle in the red zone has to change for DC. They lost the battle in the red zone defensively to the San Antonio Brahmas, and they lost it offensively to the Brahmas as well. They couldn't get anything going in the red zone, came away with field goals rather than the touchdowns, which cannot happen. If this is a close game and DC is losing the red zone battle again, watch out, because I do think Houston can pull off the upset, especially if Mark Thompson comes back, but I still just don't see it. Too many questions for me for the Houston Roughnecks. While I think they're going to keep this one close, the offense will find a little bit more rhythm. DC's too talented offensively, too talented defensively, and they will win this game 23-19. So there you have it. There are my Week 2 power rankings and predictions for Week 2 of the UFL 2024 season, the inaugural season of the United Football League. I'm going to be signing off for now. Again, you can watch these videos every Thursday or Friday. I'll try to get them up there as well. And stay tuned on the channel for more college football content. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. And I'll see all you guys in the next video. Enjoy your spring league football this weekend. Goodbye.